NFTs, digital assets and utility in Web3 gaming.
Let's start with some introductions. Alex?
Sure. So my name is Alex Lopez, and I'm one of the founders of Soundpickr. And essentially, with the exponential growth of gaming, there's low quality, no audio experience whatsoever. So we exist to marry games and music, so that musicians protect their music and games can connect with the music industry while making some money. But yeah, looking forward to the panel. Cheers.
Awesome. Fred?
So my name is Fred Antunes. I'm the CEO of RealFevr. We started 3 years ago with NFT Moments marketplace backed by IP. At the moment, currently with Cristiano Ronaldo, Armando Diego Maradona, Neymar, etc. And in January this year, we deployed Fever Battle Arena, which is a trading moments game, and where you can activate utility straightforward to the NFTs.
Awesome. And Sherry?
Yeah. Well, my name is Shaheryar. It's for your comfort, I use Sherry. Well, I'm leading the business development department for Bloxbytes, and we've been in this industry from last 7 years since the inception of blockchain. And we've got a huge exposure to work with some industry leaders in the Web3 gaming and projects around NFTs. So we've got a big exposure, a large experience working with such projects, utilizing NFTs and having utilities around it. So that's more about us.
Awesome. So let's jump in with some questions. So obviously, you guys all know that the traditional video game industry has already been using in-game currencies and virtual items for decades. Also creating open world areas for meta gameplay where people can hang out and socialize, lobbies and things like that, right? So the first question is, how do you guys think digital assets in Web3 gaming differ from traditional video games? Who wants to go first?
All right, so the Web 2 based games and the ecosystem around it, all the assets, the game assets relate and are owned by the game itself. So the biggest transition that is being made is that you are giving the ownership of those assets to the end user, to the gamer itself. So whether he stays with that game or he wishes to move to some other game, there are some models in place where one asset can be used on other games as well. So that's what we call interoperability. So the concept evolves around the concept that the asset that you own can be used or might be used in some other games. So whatever you own stays with you, is your property, is in your ownership, is held in your wallets. So that's the biggest change.
Yeah, it's really, actually, that's great. However, I do have a question. So, Fred, you probably, because you're more technical, maybe, because essentially that interoperability can only happen within the same publisher, right? So if I'm Rockstar and I've got GTA and Red Dead Redemption, and I've got a gun on GTA, then I could potentially move it over to Red Dead Redemption, but I cannot take that over to, some other game outside, right? So is that, is there a possibility for that interoperability to happen if, there's games from different publishers? Or
I don't think so. I mean, the thing is right now, game publishers and intellectual property owners are separate islands, right? It's like you said, Nintendo, Activision, Rockstar, Ubisoft, they've all got their own brands. They maybe acquire other studios and then bring that intellectual property into their publishing arm, and then you have not necessarily interoperability, but for example, if you're playing Ubisoft games, you've played Assassin's Creed, you've played Far Cry, you level up to a certain level inside a game, then you unlock content from other games that are in your library. You don't necessarily unlock content from Assassin's Creed if you've not played Assassin's Creed, because they don't assume that you're a fan of Assassin's Creed, but certainly they try and advertise the fact that they've got other games that are similar to the ones that you're playing that you can play. I don't think that ever you're going to have the different publishers have interoperability with their different franchises unless they have brand partnerships, like Disney brands with Nintendo brands. It happens occasionally, but as you know, you end up having large multinational corporations and they've got their IP, and the ones that are the most successful ones are the ones that have stood the test of time. Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog, Assassin's Creed, like I was saying, and then other kind of games that are rebooted, games that were successful back in the 90s or the late 90s. and then they get bought up by Ubisoft like Far Cry, and then they do it that way.
Yeah, and there's also the issue with competition between blockchains as well. So it's not anymore getting consensus between publishers, but it's also the fact that, you know, let's say Rockstar is on Ethereum, and then you've got Ubisoft is on Binance or probably a non-EVM chain. So there's a bit of a, it will potentially take a while for users to be able to move assets from game to game, right?
Fred, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think before, you know, we give an opinion about this, we need to check out if in Web2 industry, the business model from Blizzard, Activision, or any other is being successful or not. And if you take a look at it, the way that people is buying assets in-game, in Web2, it generates billions in revenue. So as long as it generates billions in revenue, I don't see an opportunity to change it, because the major players will never allow it to change. Now, the second thing is, of course, it's nice to have a perpetual asset that you can own forever against something centralized in-game. But something centralized in-game is something that the user will need to buy multiple times over his gaming career, and it will increase the revenue. So I think, straightforward, the biggest opportunity of Web3 is not really the in-game assets purchase, because I think in Web2 it generates billions and it should stay like that. I think the opportunity is much more community-driven, letting the community decide what assets will appear and what is the categories and the classification of those assets. Because that is in fact what I cannot vote or participate when Blizzard or Activision or any other publisher decides what are the skills that a specific NFT will have in game. So I really believe much more on this than completely reinvent the wheel, because it is not going to happen.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of challenges. I mean, using terms like Web3 and crypto and NFTs, there's a lot of hostility towards these types of terms from the traditional gamers. Even traditional gaming companies like Electronic Arts, when they do Battlefield 2042, for example, they make it a premium game, but you can also buy the in-game currency, which is not a crypto, and you can also buy the virtual items. It's all like microtransactions, additional monetization on top of what you actually paid to play the game in the first place. And it gets review bombed on Steam. People really hate the game for that. Even if it's just as good as other Battlefield games, people really hate it. So my question for the panel is, since we have seen resistance from the traditional gaming community over NFTs and crypto and Web3 and terms like metaverse, what do you think is going to, what do you think could potentially change sentiments in the traditional gaming market for them to actually want to be interested in earning something of value and being able to resell or collect virtual items? What do you guys think?
Onboarding. Onboarding is crazy for someone who would never play the Web3 game. As long as you have to install a MetaMask, try out a mnemonic key, you know, and do the whole onboarding journey, it's crazy. But the point is, if you shift the onboarding, you are no longer in Web3, you are going back to Web2 because you are centralizing the onboarding experience. So the challenge between a non-custodial solution versus the process of onboard a new Web3 user, that is, it will take at least 5 to 10 years to reach a mainstream mass volume in terms of user acquisition, in my opinion.
I also think gameplay. A lot of Web3 games at the moment, they're very, like the gameplay is not interesting or fun. And so something that's really interesting is that there's three top things that attract people to try a new game. And that is whether they already play a game within the same genre, if the story seems interesting, and if it looks fun, if they see somebody else playing. But the one thing that retains them, like the top thing, is that the gameplay is fun. You know, using me as a sole example for a whole research is not useful, but you know, I just started playing Hogwarts Legacy. I've got a beast of a computer, but still lags. But the story is great, so I've played already 90 hours worth of the game. So, you know, based on the research, it actually shows that obviously onboarding is super important, but then to retain the players, which is super important as well, is that the gameplay is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I will second Alex because the gameplay is the actual thing a gamer is focusing on. The graphics of the game, how the game is played, the skill level involved, and the experience involved to play that game. So that is the main epic of any game a traditional gamer would like to see in any game. But the concept in Web3 gaming is evolving around use of NFTs and play and earn models more these days. So unless the gameplay is not focused properly, I don't see any good progress in the Web3 gaming. But big names have now evolved in the Web3 industry and are focusing on good graphics, good games, and making NFTs and the other models a second important use case of that game. So this will definitely promote more onboarding and more of the actual gamers onboarding on Web3 gaming.
Interesting. So personally, I think that there should be more presence from game development companies that are using Web3 technology in their games at traditional video game conferences. I think that coming to these kind of conferences is really good because you're kind of like singing to the choir. Everybody knows it, they understand it, they're believers. We're all here for that reason. But it's also an echo chamber, Like everyone believes, Web3 and NFTs and play to earn is the future. But the gamers are the ones that decide at the end of the day. And the best way to find out if you've got product market fit is to go to games conferences and pitch your game and let people play it when you're still in the early ideation phases, prototype, early alpha access version, early access versions, letting people play the game and not trying to sell them the Web3 angle or the NFT angle, or you can earn something from playing our game. People will run a mile if they hear that type of thing. Of course, there's certainly people in the world that are interested, as the previous speaker was saying, who are interested in playing games to earn money. But most people are interested in playing games because of the emotional attachment that they have to the characters and the environment, etc., etc. So the first thing that needs to happen, as you guys have all said, is to make the game a compelling experience, a memorable experience, something that they want to come home from work in order to get back into, to play with their friends. And if they can buy some virtual items that then maybe in 5 years' time are going to be worth 10x, then that's an added value. But you should never sell people that 10x opportunity, because then you're basically pitching a Ponzi scheme with a game as a front end, right? So
Can I add to that as well? Because I feel that there's also the Web3 versus Web2 conversation constantly, but users never, different technologies. People do not choose a Unity versus a Unreal Engine 5 game, or in my case, people do not choose WAV files over MP3 files, or the type of technology at the end of the day is always runs in the back end, right?
Exactly.
So there is obviously great benefits to the Web3 technology, but I think that there's been a massive push on trying to convince people, this is the next thing. Well, at the end of the day, users will not care whether it's Web3, Web2, Web4, Unity, Unreal Engine, or Unreal Engine 6. So do you guys agree with that, disagree with that? Do you think that people will care about technology in a couple of years?
I don't think so, because I think that the average gamer is, as I say, more interested in what it looks like and how it plays. Is it balanced? Everybody knows about the famous Simon Sinek talk, where he talks about the way that people pitch their companies. They talk about what they do, and then they talk about why they do it at the end, where it should be the other way around. I think there's a lot of people that are pitching what they do, and not just showing the gameplay and being like, "This is our cool game. Don't you want to play this? It's absolutely fantastic. Oh, by the way, do you know that you can earn some crypto in our game, and you can buy items and you own those items. You can customize them, etc." I think that it's all about positioning. It's about positioning so that the retail people, the gamers, are actually compelled to play your game in the first place. So anyway, let's move on to the next question. So Alex, this is one that you suggested. How can Web3 gaming companies work together to create standards for digital assets, ensuring interoperability between games is possible?
Yeah, that's great. So I guess that we spoke about it earlier for very little. It's already there's a competition between blockchains, and for example, two blockchains that I've worked with are Ethereum and Solana. And the Ethereum standards, in my opinion, are very old or they're not very scalable in terms of metadata or the smart contract. There's always multiple new versions. And so I kind of feel that just getting a one standard that can work across chains, it can just make it a lot easier. So then you don't have gaming companies trying to praise how great the blockchain they're using is. And so it's a lot easier then to build an ecosystem that there's a bit more interoperability. But then, of course, we've got the issue of publishers not wanting to work with other publishers, and how those things work. So I think that it should be from the origin and trying to build something that is compatible, and not having blockchains also fighting one another and trying to be the one that leads the market.
Okay.
Actually, we're somehow working on this concept, and we have recently developed a layer 1 chain in partnership with one of our clients, 𝐿. So that chain is focusing on, the tagline is a chain for gamers. So the concept for that chain is to onboard all of the games and provide a specific marketplace where the assets can be traded, so that all of the gaming studios can make use of each other's community, each other's players, can promote their games to the same community. And also, as we talked about the interoperability thing, so that multiple assets can be used in multiple games. So if you own, for example, if you own a vehicle asset, so that can be used in any racing game. And same with if you own any avatar-based character, that can be used in any game where your profile is needed to enter that game. So this is the concept that gaming studios need to collaborate on, have a specific marketplace to trade such assets, and if possible, they could all use the same chain to avoid any competition. And that is the only thing that I see. If that happens, we will onboard and reduce all these threats that are available right now.
Are we over time, or are we still good? Oh, are we good? Okay. So I was just going to mention before we wrap up, my opinion on interoperability is it's a very, very complicated thing. As you were saying, with the different types of blockchains, they don't communicate with each other. Again, they're like separate islands. And you've got intellectual property owned by different publishers, as we mentioned before. But also, you've got the different types of engines, Unity, CryEngine, Unreal Engine, Unity and Unreal being the most popular. But even the developers that are using this technology have completely different naming conventions for animation trees. They've got different naming conventions for their vehicle physics. The C++ code that's used for a character open a door and trigger an animation can be completely different from one game to the next. So for there to be interoperability, you need to really be building together from the ground up, from the foundations up. I don't think it's possible to decide after 5 years of development of two separate games to suddenly say, hey bro, let's like have interoperability. It's never going to work. It'll be really, really hard. It'll cost an absolute fortune. Let's say you've got 10,000 items and you want to suddenly have interoperability with another game that's stylistically completely different, voxel-based versus like a physically based rendered photorealistic game in Unreal Engine and a voxel-based game in Unity. You need to get a team, an army of developers to basically create versions of each of those assets in both games for there to be functionality between them. And then, of course, the NFT, the token, it just represents ownership between those two platforms. So it's a very, very complicated thing. I think that a lot of people like to dream that interoperability is the future, but there will be cases that it will be possible, but there's a lot of technical challenges to overcome first. So anyway, I think that we're over time, so thanks very much. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Cheers.
Quick question. Yeah, we're over time, but we've lost all sense of time today. Everything's gone so bad. One thing, I mean, I am one of the dreamers about interoperability. I am definitely one of the dreamers. I'd love to see it happen. But where I'd like to see it happen is to do with the identity of the player, so not the assets of the games. So, for example, me, Aideen, I have my confirmed identity. I have my confirmed wallet. I'd love to see, whether it's, the ID verified. So I actually then, I have this and I can take that with me anywhere I go. So is that kind of interoperability possible, more so than the intra-game?
Well, I mean, of course, you've got platforms like Ready Player Me, where people can create an avatar, and then Ready Player Me are essentially like a middleware plug and play.
And it's like Decentraland. You go in and you just wander around. You have your avatar.
And the avatar is compatible with every project that has Ready Player Me integration.
But when we're talking, sorry, I'm really super interested in this. But when we're talking about owning our data, why can't I own my data and then take it where I want? Why do I have to own it in 27 different places?
That's a good question.
Two things. The subject that you are bringing is called self-sovereign identity. And it is really a very complicated subject to discuss just in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But what I would like to highlight is, you said why you can control your data or why you don't own your data. I think there is really a misconception and a misunderstanding when people talk about blockchain. Because in blockchain, you don't own anything in terms of assets. What you own is a title to control a specific part of the chain for a certain period of time. Bitcoin is not yours. You just have an exclusive right to access to it, because all the assets always belong to the chain. So with that said, when we deal with personal data and when we have to operate GDPR, for example, in Europe, it's not really an easy thing, because data on chain is immutable by design. And if you want to access your data and you want to delete it, it's not a straightforward solution that we want to deal with.
Oh yeah, I know.
So in terms of identity on chain, I think in terms of regulation there is like 10 years of discussion to solve that out. Of course, in-game with an avatar, as he was saying, it's much easier to do it because it's not you. But when we are talking about you or me, our citizenship card on chain, I think it will take like 10 years to do it.
Yeah, this is an area that I'm particularly interested, because I do a lot in AML and I do a lot in the kind of the legislative side. So that's why I say I'm a dreamer. Okay, guys, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.